All right, everyone. So welcome. Before I go ahead and read the rules and have you get started, I think it'd be great for everyone to introduce themselves. First, we'll have the team from the University of Georgia introduce themselves one at a time, and then my fellow judges and I will introduce themselves afterward. So, University of Georgia, we'd love to meet you.
Hi, so I am Peter Bartlett. I am a first year here at the University of Georgia. I am the captain of this team as well as the head of the competition side of the ethics club. I'm vice president of the UGA Ethics Club, and I'm a social studies education major.
Hello, my name is Sam Guimond. I'm a freshman here at the University of Georgia. I serve as the internal affairs officer for the ethics club, and I am double majoring in history and classics.
My name is Sam McIntyre. I am a junior at UGA. I am the external affairs officer for the UGA Ethics Club, and I am studying political science and disaster management.
Hi, I'm Bianca Medeiros Pinto. I'm a third year political science and philosophy double major, and I'm the president of the Ethics Club here at the University of Georgia.
Boy, where was that disaster management background where we needed you just now? I think. All right, it's a pleasure meeting all of you. My name is Ryan Carella. I am an attorney in private practice based out of Miami, Florida. I provide transactional legal services to clients mainly in the education industry as well as the entertainment industry. In the higher education space, I'm the general counsel for Doral College, which is a institution of higher learning in South Florida, where I also serve on the faculty. I also have a faculty appointment at the Herbert School at the University of Miami School of Business. At both of those institutions, I teach business law and ethics. Ethics is a very important part of what I do. When I was your age, we had a club at the University of Miami where I went to school called the Ethics Society, which I imagine is much like the UGA Ethics Club in terms of the activities that you do. It was the most rewarding thing I did in college, and it still creates benefits to me to this day in my professional life. So kudos to all of you for your choice in co-curricular activity. And I'm really excited to hear your presentation. So this time I'd love to hear from Rachel, John, and Steve. Have them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Rachel Frazier, and I'm a Jean Frazier professor in the Engineering Leadership Institute at the University of Florida, where I teach engineering ethics and professionalism.
Sorry, there's an order to these things. My name is John Truslow, and I'm the director of ethics and business conduct for a defense company called BAE Systems. And we're located, or at least this part of BAE is located here in southern New Hampshire. I was telling the other Georgia group that I'm the only member of my family not to attend the University of Georgia. My mother, my father, my brother, my uncle, my grandparents all attended UGA there in Athens. And so go Dogs.
Hi, and I'm Steve Koslow. I'm the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer at Allianz Life, which is a financial services company, part of the larger Allianz group of families headquartered out of Germany. And I'm excited to be here. This is my second experience with this, and thank you all very much for participating in this event. So we're looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Fantastic. So in addition, to my judge responsibilities, I've also been deputized as the Uber judge for this event, which gives me the privilege of reading this paragraph to you. Once I am done with this paragraph, you'll be able to commence with your 25-minute presentation. In this part of the competition, you are taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to the judges. Please make sure everyone knows who you are and who they are before you begin. You will have 25 minutes with a 5-minute cushion to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all 3 counts. During this time, teams will be uninterrupted. When you are finished, the judges will ask you questions for 20 minutes. During the Q&A, both you and the judges stay in character. After the Q&A, the judges will give you feedback outside the role-playing. Some important things to keep in mind. The ethical aspects of your analysis are the most important part. However, these should be described in a simple, practical, common sense fashion. Using technical philosophical terminology or basing your argument on religious or theological grounds will be considered a serious weakness. During this presentation, every member of the team must have some sort of speaking role. All right, Georgia, when I'll go ahead and start the clock when you guys start presenting, and you'll have 25 minutes with a 5-minute grace period to complete your presentation. Take it away.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much to Starbucks Sustainability Executive Board for meeting with us today. We are the back-to-back consulting group, and we are here to outline a problem that we see affecting Starbucks in their efforts to make sustainability efforts a part of their business actions and interactions, and we are here to resolve that issue for you. It is a pleasure to be here before you and to be able to discuss this issue. We think that Starbucks has a serious problem when they are making their sustainability efforts currently. Starbucks currently uses more than 8,000 paper cups per minute, which adds up to more than 4 billion a year. 1.6 million trees are harvested every year for all the use of those single-use cups. Sadly, although they are paper cups, they are lined with a polyethylene plastic, which is made from fossil fuels, and it renders the paper cups unrecyclable. So despite the devastation done to the environment with the creation of the cups, with the implementation of polyethylene plastic, as well as the removal of trees, these cups are not giving back to the environment because they are not reusable with that polyethylene plastic lining. Most Starbucks paper cups, only 4 US cities currently accept Starbucks cups in their recycling systems, and as Starbucks is an international corporation, this problem affects many different areas of the world. Those numbers are from cleanwater.org. We would like to address this problem and offer a viable solution. Our current solution is called BioPBS, succinate. It is a viable lining that could replace polyethylene in the usage of those single use cups as a way of lining the cups in their hot and cold nature to protect the user, which is made from cleaner sources as opposed to fossil fuels, as well as allows the cups to be recyclable. But before we get into this issue in more depth in our solution, I'd like to give an overview of what we will be discussing today for each of our members and how we will progress through this conversation together. So to start off with, I will give an overview of what we will be presenting, as well as a discussion of what sustainability is and why we viewed it as an important enough issue to bring it to your attention today. I will then pass it off to my colleague Sam, who will discuss the abstract ethical issues that are important to our issue and why we think Starbucks should be valuing them. And then he will discuss the promises and efforts that Starbucks has made to be sustainable in the past and how they have both succeeded and failed in their efforts. He will then pass it off to our colleague Sam, who will then discuss the consequences of Starbucks inaction in the issue that we have, as well as our specific issue in regards to sustainability. She will then pass it off to our colleague Bianca Medeiros, who will discuss our replacement solution with BioPBS. We'll then pass it off to me to talk about the consequences, both positive and negative, with the implementation of our solution. But before we start that discussion, before we start grilling you on that information, we feel it's necessary to define what sustainability is. So sustainability is currently defined by the UN Brundtland Commission as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. We view sustainability as an ethical good, as we feel it is a responsibility of those who inhabit the planet to live in the cleanest environment they can, as well as to provide for future generations by keeping the environment clean and take care of their neighbors who are also impacted by their environmental decisions by protecting our environment and using sustainable practices in their daily lives. We feel that Starbucks shares these values as we do, hence the creation of the Starbucks sustainability team and allowing us to be here for you today, the Starbucks Sustainability Executive Board. While we feel that you do share these sentiments, we feel that there is some oversight in your practices and that there is a better way to take care of our environment on a corporate level. We'd like to offer that solution. And with that in mind, I'd like to pass it off to my colleague Sam to discuss our abstract issues.
Thank you so much, Peter. My colleague has just explained to you what sustainability is, and I would like to take some time to discuss with you why it is that sustainability is something that we should care about so much. There are many aspects to the ethical necessity of sustainability in the world today, the 3 most important of which to our case today is humans, equity, and trust. To begin with humans, The Environmental Protection Agency lists worsening air and water quality, increasing the spread of certain diseases, and increasing the frequency and intensity of certain extreme weather events as consequences of climate change. All of us as humans are going to share in the negative effects of climate change, which is driven by unsustainability. It is indeed accurate to characterize it as a threat to our species as a whole. We believe that because of this, Starbucks needs to take an important effort towards reducing their unsustainability so that they can help to protect humans as a whole. Next, let's discuss equity. While I have discussed that climate change is something that affects all humans, it is important that at the same time we recognize that climate change affects some groups of people worse than it does others. According to the EPA report, Climate Change and Social Vulnerability in the United States, a focus on 6 impacts. If sea levels were to rise by 50 centimeters or global temperatures to rise by 2 degrees Celsius, low-income individuals are projected to experience approximately 11% more deaths than people in higher income brackets. Additionally, minority children under those same conditions are projected to be approximately 27% more likely to be diagnosed with asthma than non-minority children. Starbucks values say that they assert a culture of warmth and belonging where everybody is welcome. If this is something that Starbucks supports, then Starbucks should make sure that the world is a safe, healthy, and happy place for all kinds of people to live in. Lastly, let's discuss trust. Consumers are interested in associating with businesses they can trust, by which I mean businesses that keep the promises they make and do not simply try to look good in promoting their efforts towards sustainability and other virtuous goals. According to a survey from January 2016, of 32,200 respondents, 48% of those respondents said that they would not want to buy products or services from businesses that they do not trust. Starbucks, if they continue not to keep the promises they have made in the past, which we have discussed and will continue to discuss throughout our presentation to you, may very well incur some of these negative consequences if they do not step their game up, so to speak. So, what are the promises that Starbucks has made? First of all, in 2008, they pledged that they would serve 25% of their beverages in reusable ceramic mugs by the year 2015. Then, in 2019, they began an effort to go strawless. In the year 2020, they pledged that by 2030, they would have a 50% decrease in carbon emissions. And in 2022, they announced an effort to use entirely recyclable and compostable cups for their hot beverages. So, what progress has Starbucks made on this? First of all, Starbucks has succeeded in going strawless in many respects. Also, they have done very well in being transparent. All of the data that we are using to present to you, our Starbucks board is publicly available and published by Starbucks. We will explore how this transparency has its limits throughout the presentation, but all of this data is available and they are doing a very good job making it available to anyone who would like to explore what sustainability efforts Starbucks is undertaking and what progress they've made. Unfortunately, that is about where the positive things end. So let's discuss what the failures have been. First of all, only 2% of Starbucks mugs are served in reusable cups. This is far less than the 25% goal for 2015 that was set all the way back in 2008. Also, Starbucks is not currently on track to reach their carbon emissions goal by 2030. In fact, Starbucks has actually been increasing their carbon emissions. Lastly, their cups are still made of the polyethylene plastic that we were discussing earlier, and we'll continue to discuss throughout this presentation. This plastic has a number of very bad effects that we will continue to explore. I would now like to pass it on to my colleague Sam McIntyre to discuss our specific issue in regards to sustainability.
Thank you, Sam. Our specific issue in regards to sustainability boils down to what Starbucks says in its code of ethics in regards to sustainability. They claim to be aiming for 3 main goals: transparency, reduction of waste and emissions, and effective protection of our environment. However, they have failed to reach these goals. They sell the idea that they're making green pushes, but meanwhile, their emissions and waste have been rapidly increasing. This is not in line with what shareholders want from Starbucks. shareholder interest in sustainability has actually been rising rapidly. In a general meeting earlier this year, nearly half of shareholders voted in favor of an As You Sow initiative, which aimed to rapidly and aggressively combat emissions and increase reusability and recyclability in their packaging and products. This 45% vote in favor represents $21 billion of investor support, which rose 16% from a similar vote in the prior year. This was the largest shareholder vote in favor of sustainability in recent years. Yet, despite this call to action from investors, Starbucks still has not been living up to its promises. And because they haven't been living up to these promises, they have been facing consequences and creating consequences for the global environment. Each year, this past year, Starbucks produced 14,706 tons of greenhouse gas emissions, which rose dramatically from previous years and continues to rise each year, despite their promise to reduce this number. Additionally, Starbucks wastes 280 million gallons of water each year. That amount of water could provide clean drinking water to 530 people for an entire year. Also, Starbucks produces 230 million pounds of waste per year, which is roughly the same weight as 40,000 elephants. Additionally, their actions have caused major pollution of waterways that many people rely on for clean drinking water. It is clear that the actions of Starbucks do not reflect their promises and have been harming the people in their society. They also face personal consequences for these actions. Consumers have made it clear, as my colleague Sam mentioned, that they value businesses that make strides towards sustainability. And as we've seen, and my colleague Bianca will mention later, other companies have been making these pushes, and Starbucks will be left in the past as other businesses move towards sustainability and customers follow. I will now pass it on to my colleague Bianca to discuss our solution to this issue.
Thank you, Sam. So for our solution, we are proposing the implementation of bio-based polybutylene succinate, or BioPBS for short. BioPBS is a biodegradable and compostable material which can line paper cups and bowls. It's a material that was invented by the Mitsubishi Corporation and is fully certified and food safe. In addition, despite it being a biodegradable material, it still provides the heat and cold resistance that we see in the conventionally used petroplastic material that is currently implemented. So why use it? To start, it is 100% compostable and recyclable. BioPBS is made from reusable materials such as corn, cassava, and sugarcane. The paper cups coated in BioPBS are able to decompose naturally in the soil into biomass, carbon dioxide, and water, leaving essentially -0 waste to impact the environment. Additionally, it is fully food safe and certified. BioPBS is fully certified and food safe in the European Union, Japan, and the United States. As I mentioned, it also offers resistance to hot and cold liquids. The high performance heat sealability that is used to make BioPBS allows the cups to offer the same level of performance, at least as the conventionally used petroplastic cups that are currently used. Lastly, it can be conventionally used in the current machinery. This makes it a much more cost-effective alternative as opposed to full out replacing the currently used cups and utensils by using the current extrusion molding machinery to implement the BioPBS into their cups. So what are some companies setting the precedent? Well, Coca-Cola has made strides towards sustainability by investing into recyclable bottles made of sugarcane from Brazil. The distinction here between Coca-Cola and the solution that we're proposing is that BioPBS is a fully decompostable material, whereas the bottles that Coca-Cola uses are only recyclable, they do not decompose. Additionally, an Italian coffee manufacturer named Lavazza has made efforts towards sustainability. Lavazza has harnessed the efforts of bio-based plastic by launching their biodegradable coffee capsules. Now, instead of throwing coffee capsules into the trash can to end up in landfills, coffee capsules can be thrown out into their compost pile and decompose naturally into the environment, using a very similar technology to that which we're proposing today. Since then, several companies have taken their lead in following this trend and trying to take part in the sustainable initiatives such as Percol and Dualit by also launching sustainable coffee pods that can decompose. I will now pass it on to my colleague Peter, who will discuss the possible consequences and benefits to be incurred.
Thank you very much, Bianca. While we recognize that our solution can be seen as an ethical good and we feel it is necessary to implement, we do feel it is our responsibility to also be transparent with you, as you guys have claimed to be and promised to be in your efforts towards sustainability. As such, we feel it is our moral obligation to make Starbucks and their sustainability team aware of possible costs that could be incurred through the implementation of our solution, no matter how negligible or how indifferential we think that they may be. So there is a possible price increase in manufacturing. As my colleague Bianca just outlined, the technology used to create bio-PBS lining is a very cost-efficient usage and could reduce Starbucks's manufacturing cost in the future in the long run. But in the short run, there is a possible cost increase through the implementation of most green initiatives that cause the single-use products to be more expensive than those used through fossil fuels, as they're harder to obtain. There is also a possibility that there will be a struggle with cups usability. As we have outlined just a moment ago, certain companies have implemented bio-PBS and it has been fully certified as being capable of lining cups, handling both hot and cold food and drink options. But as this is such a sensitive topic, as we want to protect the consumers of Starbucks, we still feel it is necessary to outline this as a possible consequence of the usage of bio-PBS, as it is not a product that Starbucks has created on their own. It would be adopted from the Mitsubishi Corporation. Therefore, it can't be tested as effectively because it's not being developed by Starbucks. And Starbucks may find that there are certain consequences that they suffer from with how hot and cold their liquids are, as opposed to other corporations that may not have this issue. With all of that in mind, we'd also like to talk about the possible benefits that would come from the implementation of our product as a way of making those consequences seem negligible. Firstly, I'd like to outline the economic benefits. There are currently 33 tax incentives for green energy in the US alone, according to PwC's Green Taxes and Incentives Tracker, including cash grants and tax incentives that reduce tax liabilities when investing in new initiatives. The fact is that the modern world is very interested in developing green technology and protecting the planet from global warming that has serious negative consequences on all of us, as we have outlined earlier. Many nations are taking the steps necessary to incentivize corporations taking green steps and using sustainable business practices. And through the reduction of waste and emissions by the implementation of bio-PBS lining, Starbucks could find themselves on the better end of the economic spectrum, taking advantage of these possible tax incentives and tax reductions. The only ones that we outlined were in the US, as Starbucks is a largely US-based company, but it's also an international corporation. And there are tax incentives in most developed countries that would allow Starbucks to feel incentivized and see an economic benefit come from the usage of bio-PBS lining. It should also be outlined the legal benefits that come from this. Our solution incurs no cost in terms of legality. There is no laws that are being overstepped by the implementation of bio-PBS lining. And it should be noted that while that is the case, we may see in the future a crackdown from modern day governments in the excessive emissions and waste that come from corporations. There are currently 10 taxes in the US against environmental damage in the US, according to that PwC's Green Taxes and Incentives Tracker. And it is likely that this number will rise as the world continues to feel the effects of excessive waste and excessive emissions that stress our environment. Starbucks could see themselves avoiding many legal costs that could occur in the future, as they would be reducing their emissions to a point where they wouldn't be suffering from taxes that cause damage for environmental damage on corporations. We'd also like to outline the possible benefits in regards to public relations. As we have outlined earlier in this PowerPoint and in this production, Starbucks has failed to follow through on many of the promises that they have made to the general public in their efforts to be a more sustainable company. Only 38% of US consumers surveyed in a Greenprint 2022 study tend to believe that corporations are being truthful when they claim to make authentic commitments to environmental sustainability. That is a noticeable drop from 47% in Greenprint's 2021 study just a year before. Overall, 41% of people surveyed in Greenprint's 2022 survey believe that US corporations are doing a poor job of reducing their carbon footprint. I don't think it is beyond belief that the men and women surveyed in that could have had Starbucks and their failed promises in the past on their mind when responding to that survey, as they have failed to reduce their emissions as promised. It should also be noted that 66% of US consumers and 80% of young adult US adults surveyed in Greenprint's Business of Sustainability Index are willing to pay more for sustainable products versus less sustainable competitors. Fact is that the modern world, once again, is interested in protecting the environment and taking green initiatives, and they look to corporations that have such a disastrous effect on the environment to take the necessary steps and reflect the values that they hold dear to themselves. With Starbucks implementing bio-PBS and reducing serious waste and emissions, and by making their cups recyclable and biodegradable, it is likely that Starbucks consumers would not be bothered by a possible increase, as we outlined, being a possible cost that Starbucks could incur, and would actually feel relieved to see that Starbucks living up to the promises it makes to the general public in the past. With all that in mind, we'd like to give a summary of our argument, as it was somewhat long. Starbucks has made an effort for sustainability, as exemplified by the fact that we're sitting before the Starbucks Sustainability Executive Board. However, they currently use polyethylene plastic, which is reducing the positive impacts that come from their former sustainability efforts by making their single-use cups unrecyclable and non-biodegradable, as well as burning fossil fuels, the creation. Bio-PBS is a sufficient replacement as it is made from sustainable resources as opposed to fossil fuels, as it is useful in the technology used to create the single-use products, and as it is recyclable and biodegradable. It is also likely that Starbucks would experience many possible benefits through tax reductions, avoiding of taxes on emissions, and through restoration of their PR impact in light of their failed promises in the past. With all of that in mind, we'd like to say thank you very much for listening to our presentation, and we are excited to receive your question and answer portion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Back to Back Consulting Group. This board is definitely on the same page as all of you about the importance of sustainability to this organization, and we appreciate your recommendations on any product innovations that you can provide that can help us affirm that commitment to sustainability, and so we can do right by our stakeholders and do right by our planet. So we thank you for your insights there. At this time, I would like to allow the other members of the board to direct some questions for you. Some of the questions might ask you to clarify some points, expand upon your points, or maybe even take the conversation in a different direction. We'll see what the board has to say. We'll start with Ms. Frazier. We'll go then to Mr. Truslow and then Mr. Kozlow. Ms. Frazier?
All right, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. We appreciate that. Quick question. How exactly will the switch from the polyethylene to the bio-PBS impact greenhouse gases? Help me understand that.
Well, as outlined earlier in the presentation, polyethylene plastic is currently created through the use of fossil fuels like oil and natural gas, which are non-sustainable forms of energy, and through the creation of polyethylene plastic, there are emissions of carbon through the burning of natural gas and oil through the creation of polyethylene plastic. Bio-PBS would not have that same reduction of natural gas as it is made from sustainable products as lighting.
And just to add on to what my colleague Peter said, polyethylene plastic, which is currently used, is a liner that is placed inside the cups to make sure that the liquid seeps through. But this liner essentially renders the cup unrecyclable. As Peter mentioned earlier, there's only 4 plants in all of the 4 cities in all the United States, that are able to recycle this material. So it requires a very specific process, which means the majority of these cups end up in the landfill and just to create waste. Whereas the bio-PBS that we are proposing is completely biodegradable, meaning that a customer could essentially throw them into their compost pile and it would break down.
Yeah, and this is actually the interesting the interesting point, right? Because you talk about switching materials because there's a benefit after the switch, right? For the environment. Perhaps there's some economic or financial benefit to us. But then there's also the consideration that this would actually be increasing demand from a company, Mitsubishi Corp, who is one of the largest suppliers of other types of materials that may not be as sustainable and environmentally friendly in terms of production, right? As you're saying, the bio-PBS is. So how is it that we should make a decision on whether to keep the current use of polyethylene, right? And figure out what's more important. Is it actually the amount of recycling that could be had, right? The amount of biodegradability after use of the cups if we keep polyethylene? Or is it that, perhaps we switch to increase demand from a supplier that actually might increase greenhouse gases?
Well, I believe that in our increase of demand for bio-PBS as opposed to polyethylene plastic, that will prompt corporations supplying it to produce more of the bio-PBS and less of the polyethylene plastic as we have raised demand for the bio-PBS. And I believe that as one of the leading corporations, especially in the coffee industry, Starbucks could set a great example for others, and that it would cause a trend of higher demand for bio-PBS and lessen the demand for polyethylene plastic.
And to move off that, I think that while there is possible risk by supporting a corporation that does not have sustainable business practices, I think that it is more the responsibility of Starbucks to take responsibility for the efforts that they can make, as opposed to the possible incentives that may happen from the support of Mitsubishi Corporation. Starbucks is not responsible for the sustainability efforts made by Mitsubishi because they can't affect them, but they can change and manipulate their effects and their efforts made in sustainability. And so we feel that they should move to more renewable resources in terms of their lighting.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that candid response. But don't we have a responsibility to make a decision and face these ethical dilemmas, which actually is on a day-to-day basis in terms of operations, who it is we do business with, right? Don't we have a responsibility to think very deeply about that and make the most informed decision?
Yes, ma'am. I think very much so. But as my colleague Sam outlined just a moment ago, I think, not only are we taking responsibility for our actions, but through the incentivization of bio-PBS, and because Starbucks is such a large leader in terms of a big corporation, by setting the standard and by having the initiative to use more renewable resources in their single-use products, I think that even corporations that they can't take responsibility for in terms of their sustainability projects, they could incentivize them to develop more sustainable business projects as Starbucks moves towards more sustainable business projects and sets a precedent around the world.
All right, thank y'all. And I have one more quick question. So we have a responsibility to consider both the economic and the technical feasibility aspects of the switch. Do y'all know what the softening temperature of bio-PBS is? Because what we can't have is hot drinks in a cup that the plastic melts and burns customers.
So, as I mentioned earlier, the bio-PBS has at least the same performance as the currently used conventional plastic cups. Some studies have even reported for it to have higher performance. So that is not, through all of our studies that we have conducted in proposing this idea, that has not been something that has even been suggested as a possible harm. It has been suggested that it is a very solid alternative and performs at least as well as the currently used plastic cups.
Additionally, it has proven to be capable of at least withstanding well past boiling point, as other companies have utilized this product in their coffee pods, which actually withstands the brewing of the coffee. So being used as a vessel for the coffee would be less of a burden on the plastic than the brewing of it.
All right, thank y'all.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that though, because I took from one of your slides that you had a concern that it would degrade the consumer's experience. And so maybe in this question you can just kind of address that again, because maybe I misunderstood that on your slide. So, but as a board member, here's what I heard. What I heard is that we're currently following the law, right? We're not breaking the law by doing what we're doing now. That the change you're suggesting is likely to raise our costs. And at least what I took from your slide and what I may have misunderstood is that there's always the risk of actually affecting the consumer's experience when they come into Starbucks, based on what I wasn't entirely sure. And so maybe you could clarify that. But here's my question. So yes, sustainability, I'll just, for the sake of this, I'll just accept your premise that sustainability, it's certainly one of our values, and you declared it as sort of an ethical good, but it's not necessarily an ethical good that trumps all others, right? There must be some other thing out there that, I mean, we haven't done this, right? There's some reason why we haven't done this, some value that we must hold dear that has prevented us from making this change prior to now. And I guess what I'm asking you to maybe make a little more explicit is, like, what is the trade-off? What is it about Starbucks that if we care about this so much, why haven't we done it? What's the value that we're gaining currently?
Yeah, so I appreciate that question. We spent a lot of time thinking about that as we discussed our implementation. I think that there are a lot of aspects to that question. The reason that this has not been implemented before is because it's sort of a pioneer in terms of the development of sustainable products. This is a somewhat new product, and although it has been tested in some corporations, they've been pretty small. Mitsubishi Corporation has only used this as outlined with Lavazza in full terms. And so it's a pioneer opportunity. So I don't know if Starbucks was privy to the opportunity to use bio-PBS in their lining, as it is a pretty new development in terms of technology. I think that they've been aware of the problem with their cups not being reusable, as they have made claims that they wish to push towards more reusable cups, to use ceramic mugs, to develop the ability to have their cups be less single use. So I think Starbucks has been aware of this issue. I don't know if they've found a viable solution, and that's why we feel it's necessary in back-to-back consulting to make all of you aware of it, because it is a new pioneer in industry. As in regards to the consequences that we outlined as a possible negative consequence, we debated on whether or not we should include that in our presentation, because we feel that those consequences are somewhat negligible. As with the price increase as outlined, we think that in the long run, Starbucks would be very much saving themselves money, as the technology used is cheaper to create bio-PBS than it is for polyethylene plastic, particularly because it's not using expensive goods like natural gas and oil. And we also think that, as outlined earlier in the presentation, consumers in the US alone are overwhelmingly in favor of paying for more expensive goods, if necessary, if they view that it's a more sustainable business practice. We don't think that this would be a major price increase to Starbucks's coffee production every day, but if it was, we feel that the US public is interested in seeing that price increase with the development of sustainability. I recognize that sustainability, while important, is not the only thing that is valued in a corporation, but we feel that there are economic, legal, and PR benefits that come from the implementation of this. And the only reason that I can think of that Starbucks would not have this product on hand already is because they were unaware of it being a viable solution, which is why we felt it was necessary to bring it to you today.
Yeah, and I would like to add on to that the economic benefits that we have been discussing with using bio-PBS are ones that are only going to increase as time goes on. We've said, as we have said, it's going to be a long-term benefit, because as these limited resources such as oil and natural gas slowly deplete, as the supply of them gets lower, they're going to get much more expensive over the next few decades. And bio-PBS is going to be a much more realistic economic alternative to polyethylene as this process occurs. So it's something that is going to, especially in the long run, it will be a very, very good economic alternative.
Additionally, I'd just like to add that in the past, Starbucks's solution to, as Peter mentioned, to the wastefulness of their current cup configuration, their goal was to replace them with ceramic mugs. However, that alternative is far more expensive than the polyethylene lined paper cups. And we recognize that, which is why we are bringing another alternative solution to the table for you guys today.
And so I think I'm asking the same question in a slightly different way. So but the way that you've described what you've just described makes me wonder, is there a moral dilemma here at all then? Like, in other words, if there is no alternate side, there is no bad choice, there's just the good choice you've given me. How would you define the moral dilemma then?
It's a complicated question.
I think that in this case, the main dilemma is just taking the initiative to make the change, because in the short term, it may not be much more expensive, but it will be time consuming to hire or train employees on making this switch to this product. And so it is a commitment that Starbucks has to make to actually follow through with this, instead of just promising more sustainable solutions, yet failing to develop them fully.
I think in addition to that, it's also about the struggle is to take responsibility. I think that Starbucks has made efforts to be transparent with the public, but they have struggled with taking responsibility of those efforts, and setting the initiative that they claim that they wish to make, and to be candid with the public, and to be clear that while they have failed, they're interested in trying once more. I think it's a challenge to take responsibility and not pass it off as another corporation's responsibility, but instead say that we at Starbucks value this and it is important to us, and we must take the initiative to do this. That is a challenge to do, and I think that it's a challenge that most corporations struggle with in the world, and I think that's why we struggle from such negative consequences in the environment, is because corporations aren't interested in taking responsibility and are interested in being clear with the public about what they want to do, instead passing it off as the responsibility of another corporation. But Starbucks seems very interested in doing that, so we'd like to challenge them to do that.
And in addition to that, as we spoke about at the very beginning of the presentation, we would argue that there is a moral bad to what is happening. Not only has Starbucks made public announcements about their intention to go more sustainable, it is in countless value statements of theirs, but the impact on the environment is far surpassing their efforts to go sustainable. They got rid of the plastic straws, but the efforts to go sustainable, the plastic straw is nothing compared to the amount of cups that end up in the landfill every single day. And so these cups, they're detrimental to the environment, let alone to speak on the water and the CO2 emissions they get released in the manufacturing of the cups. But just the cups alone that end up in the landfill, it truly undermines their efforts to become sustainable through getting rid of straws. So I would argue that there is a moral harm there to be balanced out.
And it is always difficult to make change. Keeping with what you're doing is always easier than making changes, and we recognize that. And we've seen how Starbucks has struggled with that, in that although they have developed new lids to the cups to where they are usable without a straw, they do still offer straws at the majority of their locations. And that's just one example of how Starbucks we can see that you are making attempts to go in a more sustainable direction, but it is difficult for the company to commit to those changes and accept new practices as opposed to maintaining the status quo, if you will.
To summarize all that, what we would say the ethical dilemma would be here is, in the short term, it's a question between, should we take the initiative or should we spend a little bit more time and money and to take on the risks involved in taking the initiative, or to save that time, money we would spend otherwise. In the long term, though, with all of the negative consequences of unsustainability practices that we have discussed throughout the presentation, this isn't really much of a choice. This is something that's going to need to happen at one point or another.
Thank you, Steve.
Let me follow up a little bit on what one of John's questions. You are indicating or implying that we are not being as transparent as we should be. Can you provide me some specifics of what transparency you would like for us to engage in, and what the impact of the additional transparency would be?
Yes, I think that we do commend you for publishing these statistics on emissions and waste. However, we have seen very little follow-up in the media and on the website about that is made clear and readily available about how different initiatives have failed or succeeded. There's very little follow-up to the promises that have been made, particularly with the cups and the straws. The straws, it seems a little bit misleading to claim to go strawless, yet still offer them at most, if not all, locations. And additionally, the paper cups, Starbucks has made claims that they are recyclable because technically they are recyclable in 4 cities, but in practice, that's not the reality. Most people around the nation are unable to recycle the paper cups produced by Starbucks. So we believe that that is not full transparency and that it is misleading to the public.
And to work on that, I think it is also important that Starbucks, when you're researching Starbucks sustainability and you go to their website where they have so much published material on the initiatives that they've taken and in regards to the carbon emissions and waste that they produce per year, they don't give updates on the current promises and how they're progressing. Starbucks made public statements about what promises and what goals they have for the future, and those can be easily found on their sustainability website. You can check what Starbucks is hoping to do in the future, but there is not there's not follow-up information about where they are with those goals and the current day. And I think that the reason that is because if they're worse, the average consumer could look at those goals and see that they're nowhere close to fulfilling the promises that they've made to the public, which we think withholding that information is somewhat lacking transparency. I think that public does a good job of publishing lots of materials, but the lack of certain materials and the withholding of certain information is clouding the waters in terms of the consumer and corporation relationship, because the consumer is unaware of the negative impacts that Starbucks is having and the places they're failing, because those are unpleasant things to talk about on a corporate level. Nobody wants to tell their consumer in what areas they're failing, what areas they're struggling with, although those are things that every corporation has to struggle with. And we think that Starbucks should make the effort to do that, regardless of how pleasant it is to have that discussion.
And if we were as transparent as you would recommend, what would be the result of that transparency, do you believe?
So as outlined earlier in our presentation, according to a Greenprint 2021 study, 38% of US consumers surveyed tend to believe that corporations are truthful when they're making claims that they're making environmental pushes, which is a drop since the 2021 study. So we think that the consequences of lack of transparency on a corporate level is that consumers do not trust their corporations and the corporations that they're buying products from in their efforts to make sustainability. And so we think that as the climate crisis continues to worsen and as we see the continued effects of a struggling environment, people will be less interested in buying from Starbucks because of the failed transparency in the past and the inability to follow through on promises made to the public. And so we could see possible cost incurred by Starbucks from a loss of a consumer basis. But by being clear and by taking our transparency policy prescriptions, we think that the public will be more willing to trust Starbucks and more willing to support Starbucks in their efforts to make sustainability efforts in the future.
Additionally, I'd like to add that one great way to get the attention and loyalty of customers is to become transparent with these goals and then at the same time announce the switch to bio-PBS, because that would be acknowledging where they have failed in the past, but also more importantly, addressing how they are going to fix their errors in this way, and acknowledging the issue while also announcing their solution would help build consumer trust as well as investor support.
Thank you.
All right. Were there any other questions from the panelists? So first of all, I want to inquire, can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello? Yes. So
Yes,
my
we can hear you.
apologies, my Wi-Fi, what's that? Hello?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, I was thinking the Wi-Fi in my house decided that it just needed to take a break. And so I'm logging into Zoom on my phone. I can still hear the presentation and see the presentation, but I'm turning my camera off to save bandwidth here. While I continue to get this sorted out, though, so there are no other questions from the panelists. I think we're done with the Q&A time period. So with the time remaining, let's go ahead. We can take our hats off. We've completed the simulation. I just want to begin by letting the group know that you did an excellent job with this. Sustainability is one of the most important imperatives of any business ethics initiative at any organization. And you all provided a well-researched, thorough, nuanced discussion of this through the lens of Starbucks, a company that I've always thought was kind of on the forefront of sustainability initiatives. So really, really excellent. I will defer to my colleagues to allow them to provide feedback first, and whatever time remains, I'm happy to lend in some thoughts. Why don't y'all go ahead and let the folks give the folks your thoughts on your performance, on their performance.
All right, so thank you all very much for that presentation. I think there are a couple of things that we really should pull out that will help you. Okay, so the first one is that saying something different from what you do is not a dilemma. It's a straight up violation, right? So, so that's the first thing. So I think, eliminate that piece of it, right? But then also walking into a boardroom and telling a client that they are, now I'm going to use my word, all right, not your word, but I'm going to paraphrase what I heard. Terrible. That's what I heard from y'all. That's a sure way to see the boardroom from the outside. Okay. And what I mean by that is it's not the best way to actually make your point and make your voice heard. Okay. Because there's a big difference between it can come across as threatening. That seems like a really strong word, but that's literally what it is, as opposed to motivating. And one of the strongest things that your team put up in your presentation, in my mind, was that idea of that 16% increase in shareholder opinion about sustainability. That might motivate me, right? As opposed to, well, there's this public perception that you're not being transparent, right? And then when I hear that, I'm like, oh, my guard is totally raised. So just keep that in mind, okay? And y'all are definitely going bold, and I appreciate that. I do want to say one other thing. So go bold in the idea that saying that you're doing something and not doing it, that's not the dilemma. Okay, go bold, and that's actually like a total violation, right? So let's figure out how we can fix this, right? That might be a way to approach it. The other thing, when we were asking questions, y'all had a tendency to double down, triple down, and quadruple down. And what I mean by that is one person would respond, and then another teammate would say, oh, I want to add something. And then another teammate would say, oh, and I want to add something. And when you dilute your point too much, it weakens even the strongest points that you have. So I really want y'all to think about that. And it is a style change, which can be the most difficult kinds of things to do. So just consider that. And you did a great job in the presentation itself. I think the Q&A is your biggest area of opportunity for improvement, just in the way you kind of come together as a team and handle the questions. One way you could do it is maybe if somebody's asking about, for example, John asked about basically what's the dilemma here. Maybe one of y'all could tackle the dilemma, right? And you just kind of come in saying, all right, I'm going to tackle the dilemma. And then you trust teammates, trust them, and they're just ways to make it more motivational, right? Motivate us as opposed to, like push, right? But great job overall. So I'm gonna pass it over to John or Steve now.
I can jump in. Yeah, I think I was very impressed that you had a very specific problem and a very specific solution. That was one of the highlights of what you guys did, is because it was so narrowly focused. It was very easy to say, this is the problem, this is the solution, this is how you can get to the solution. So that was a very clean story from that standpoint. As Rachel mentioned, the adversarial tone was problematic. I'll be honest with you. As I'm in a company, if I walked into a boardroom and told my board that they were failed as many times as you told us we failed, it didn't work. You've got to build the collaboration and the problem solving solution that's a win-win for everyone. The other thing is, make it personal. I didn't hear the personal nature of this. In other words, you had some examples that were very abstract, but you all are, if I'm going back to my board persona again, you are our future audience. You are the future people who are buying our cups of coffee. Have you stopped buying our cups of coffee because of this? So make it personal, make it real, make it tangible. That will resonate with your audience. But all in all, I thought you had a very powerful, persuasive discussion. Thank you.
Okay, so I thought, I thought it was really good, and I appreciated also kind of the passion with which you were arguing your positions, and I can tell that I believed you, right? I had a sense that you actually did believe this. But let me go back to this idea of a moral dilemma, right? So I really do believe that you identified a very complicated situation that had, from your perspectives, that had a moral component to it. So you demonstrated an ethical value, right? And then I understand that, and I agreed with you. You also told us about moral harm, and I agree with you, but I still don't believe that you really ever articulated a dilemma, right? And a dilemma would be where you really put several things against each other and showed why there were trade-offs that needed to be made. I didn't believe that you were putting sustainability up against something else, because again, maybe to Rachel's point, we have been doing this thing for a reason, right? We've been doing it with the idea that maybe that it provided the best customer experience, or maybe it was because we let the customers buy this great cup of coffee at a low price. There was a reason why we were doing it. And when you make an argument acknowledging that there are competing sides and competing ideas that good, credible people could understand on several sides, you're showing some empathy with the people that you're also trying to convince. You're basically saying to the board, look, you're not evil people. I understand that you want to make money. I know that you want to make your customers happy. I know that you've got these other competing moral values that are not bad things. But here in this example, I want to show you why sustainability is more important than these things. That's more of a moral dilemma. And the kind of traditional understanding of a moral dilemma is that there is another side that can be articulated. And to that end, I feel like in your attempt to kind of convince me of the moral component and convince me of the moral harm, I think you really did gloss over some of these other things, like. And I know you don't really have the the time to really do a real cost analysis of how much more this would cost, but not having any kind of suggestion for why we might want to spend money and attach a number to it made me go, I don't know. It feels like you're kind of glossing over this fact that we're in business. Like I need you to say, hey, this might cost you $3 billion next year, but it's worth it. And here's why it's worth it. Because that acknowledges what this board actually is in business to do, which is run Starbucks and be an ongoing concern. So anyway, that's all I would say is, if you frame your argument more in a, hey, look, good people could believe this. There are reasons why my idea is better than these other ways that you have been doing it. It's going to cost you real money, but I mean that we should be spending that money. That's a more realistic way to approach a board that has been operating under some sense of value up till this present time. I think that's all I got.
All
Yeah,
right.
it always helps, and that idea of the dilemma, that's two bad choices, right? That's the dilemma. And I gave you one at least, go with Mitsubishi. Right. What are the greenhouse gas consequences? What are the unintended consequences of that, right? Versus keeping it the same. We know the risk is low, keeping it the same, right? We know exactly what's going to happen. There's not much uncertainty there, but the switch, that's a pretty big risk. And then, there are companies in the state of Georgia, startup companies that have come into there doing biorenewable materials. Maybe that's a prime opportunity to go, well, maybe you don't have to go with Mitsubishi, but maybe you could go with this other company. So anyways, great job. Sorry, Brian, I did not mean to interrupt you.
I wouldn't consider it an interruption at all. That was a terrific contribution there at the end. I have judged way too many of these in various settings, and I can say this is one of the best researched presentations I've come across. You all brought the facts, which is often something that's very hard to do, because even a public company like Starbucks, they're not going to be, and even one that's supposedly prides themselves on transparency, they're not going to just like volunteer all the information. You got to dig around for it. And you all certainly dug. And I appreciated that. I loved that you gave us multiple stakeholder perspectives. You not only did you tell us why this was going to help the environment, but you also brought the facts as to why the shareholders want this. You brought and why the people want this. You gave us all the different stakeholder perspectives to further underscore the importance of why this is critical. And while I do I am totally with on my colleagues that no board of directors likes to feel like they're getting bullied by their consulting firm. I think if, to the other side of the argument, if there is any particular subject matter that I think is worth kind of being a little sharp with corporate America about, it is perhaps climate change and environmentalism. And, it's a circumstance that your generation, is going to live long enough to see the really tragic effects of, more so than ours. And so I can certainly understand your anger and, your sense of urgency. That being said, you never want to be too mean on the folks that are paying your consulting firm's bills. So, you find the balance there. Ultimately what I kept coming back to, and it did bug me, as I think it bugged John as well, because it talked about this, is you all had a slide. And it's burned into my mind where, and again, I'm unfairly paraphrasing it, but basically the content of that slide said, we don't know how much our solution costs, and we don't know if it's going to work. That is a tough thing to tell us when your whole presentation is about why we should adopt this reform. Those are two very big question marks, especially when the crux of your presentation is to be able to convince us that what you are proposing is a financially feasible option. That is one of the things that you're tasked to do with this 25-minute presentation. And I understand you don't have any way of definitively telling us how many more cents a cup it is going to cost to line our cups with bio-PBS as opposed to the polyethylene or whatever it was called. But we depend on a firm like yours to give us some estimates, right? There are perhaps exercises that you can do. There are, different variables. You could give us like a conservative estimate. You could give us a more beneficial estimate and give us an idea of how much more this is going to be. What's it going to do to our cost of goods sold so that we can do a financial analysis? And we'll understand, the board's going to understand that you're not going to have the perfect answer, but at least give us something that can give us a ballpark that can help us make a financial decision. But it's dangerous to come to a board, tell us that we have to do something, and tell us we don't know how much it's going to cost and we don't know if it's going to work. The other thing that's important about providing a cost estimate is it would also allow us to evaluate the cost of alternatives. One of the things that you had mentioned is that there are only 4 municipalities that currently can recycle the material that Starbucks uses in its cups. Well, how much would it cost to get all of the municipalities to be able to recycle that material? Could we lobby legislators at the local and state and federal level to adopt these reforms? Could we be providing grants to municipalities and research grants to speed this along? And, that might be expensive, but could it potentially be cheaper than changing our manufacturing process to make all of our cups line with this PBS material? And the answer is we don't know, because we don't know how much this would cost, and we don't know if this would work, and we don't know what it's going to take to get our friends at Mitsubishi to share the technology with us. I don't know if they're going to be willing to do some kind of licensing deal with us. There's a lot of question marks there that would really make it tough for a board to make a decision based on the parameters that you've given us. But it sucks that the way these are always kind of presented to you, right? We tell you the things that we like, we tell you the things where you need to improve, and then you feel really bad about yourself because we give you the bad part last. Please don't let me understate how impressed I was with the quality of research that you brought in, with how well organized your presentation was, and how knowledgeable you were, because you definitely were all of those things, and I really enjoyed your presentation.
Yes, totally echo that. Great job.
All right. So I think we were supposed to wrap up by 45. So I think we were on time. Again, my apologies. I promise you I didn't miss any of your presentation. When the Wi-Fi went out, I immediately got in on my phone. You couldn't see me because I was trying to save bandwidth, but I'm just glad I got back with you again. AT&T fiber in rare form. As always, but I'm glad I was able to connect back with everybody again and to catch the whole presentation and finish strong. Really, really excellent work, guys. And best of luck with the rest of your competition. I know you got a 10-minute presentation and a 90-second presentation tomorrow. You got a lot of IBEC ahead. Be sure to pace yourselves.